Hey there, folks. Welcome to the Rybrary. I'm your Rybrarian. No talking in the Rybrary. Hope you're having a great October and enjoying some good horror books. So, if you've watched this channel at all, you'll probably know that I'm a big H.P. Lovecraft fan. I got here my H.P. Lovecraft Film Festival shirt on for this video. I started reading Lovecraft in my 20s, and my interest in horror had kind of flagged over the years. Mainstream horror of the 80s and 90s, while it was cool, was not, intellectually stimulating particularly, or, felt super creative to me. And then, I read Lovecraft and, discovered the world of cosmic horror and Lovecraftian horror and weird horror and all of these things. And I just loved it so much. It was, exactly what I was looking for. There's lots of things I love about Lovecraft's writing and his contributions to the world of horror. And, I'm not here to explain all of those things to you exactly. What I am here to do is give you a list of 5 great Lovecraftian authors that are not Lovecraft, because cosmic horror is a big world and there's lots of great stuff being written and that has been written both before and since Lovecraft. So I've come up with a list of 5 authors that I think deserve to be highlighted in this world. I'm going to be doing this in chronological order, starting with one of Lovecraft's contemporaries, going up to present day. So the first author here that I have on my list, I said, is a contemporary of Lovecraft's, and that's Algernon Blackwood. He actually was writing, before Lovecraft was born, I think. He wrote across a bunch of different genres and styles, but he is definitely particularly remembered for his contributions to cosmic horror. Lovecraft himself included Algernon Blackwood in his 4, modern masters, at the time in the 20s or 30s when he wrote his classic nonfiction essay called Supernatural Horror and Fiction. Blackwood's 2 most famous works are The Wendigo and The Willows, 2 novellas of weird horror. I have read them both, and they're both fantastic. There's 2 kinds of things I really like a lot about Algernon Blackwood's work, and that, you can see influenced Lovecraft in the direction of cosmic horror in the years to come. The first of those is a profound admiration and fear of the natural world and of, the deep sense of mystery of what exists in the natural world that we don't understand. The Wendigo takes place in the deep wilds of the Canadian wilderness, and The Willows takes place in the swamps of the Danube River in Hungary. And in both of these stories, the main characters are, outdoorsmen, and that's like a kind of a distinction from Lovecraft's more academic, protagonists. These are, people going on hiking adventures and that kind of thing. And so you see very clearly a profound respect and admiration and fascination with the natural world and its wonders. And that's connected to the second thing that I think is an important aspect of Blackwood's work, and that is that the horror is married very closely with a sense of awe and reverence and wonder, and this is the thing, or one of the things that really sticks out to me about cosmic horror in general, is that there's not just the horror elements. There's a deep and profound wondrousness to the stories being told here, and to the kinds of things that are being presented to the reader. The next author that I'm including here, I actually haven't ever read anything by. I do hope to one day, but I just haven't gotten around to it. And this inclusion is more out of a sense of this person's important place in the history of H.P. Lovecraft's work and cosmic horror, and that's August Derleth. Derleth was something of a protege of Lovecraft. He took the Lovecraft mythos, which Derleth actually coined the term Cthulhu mythos. Lovecraft never used that term. He wrote a lot of his own works in the mythos and did his own kind of spin on it, which I'll get to in a second. But what his most important contribution really to the history of this style of horror is the founding of his publishing company, Arkham House, which he founded shortly before Lovecraft's death, I think. and was responsible for publishing Lovecraft's works into the future, in future years for a long time, many decades, and also publishing the works of other writers in that similar vein. If it weren't for August Derleth, Lovecraft's work might have been relegated to the dustbins of history, and we might, he might just be like every other pulp writer who got, published in Weird Tales and no one remembers these days. When it comes to his own kind of writings in the Lovecraft mythos, Derleth is kind of criticized quite a bit for his writings being kind of counter to the spirit of Lovecraft's work. And what do I mean by that? Derleth was a Christian, and he, in his interpretation of the Cthulhu mythos, he made it a very much good versus evil thing, and there were good entities and bad entities, and made it try to fit much more into a Christian worldview, as opposed to Lovecraft's original very indifferent cosmos, kind of thing where the entities couldn't care less about us. We're basically just ants to them. While it is true that this is very much not in the spirit of what Lovecraft likes to do, who cares? Honestly, we shouldn't be concerned with trying to, do exactly what Lovecraft did. We should be doing our own spins on these things. And so, while I don't know if I'm going to actually enjoy his work, people tend to not think it's that great. Aside from what I just talked about, I don't think it's particularly considered great quality. Regardless, his position in history is important enough, and his role in the history of cosmic horror is important enough where I think he deserves to be mentioned here, and I do plan on reading some of his works in the future. The third author here I have on my list is, jumping quite a bit forward in history. This writer started writing in the 70s, I believe, and did a lot of his mythos works in the 80s. And his name is Michael Shea. I chose Michael Shea as one author and also to represent the changing trajectory of Lovecraft mythos writing in the 80s. Before this, it was a lot of, Lovecraft pastiches. It was a lot of, took place in the 20s, the same kinds of settings, the same kinds of protagonists, basically just rehashing the same ideas. And, we don't want just that, right? We want, people to do their own things. So the character of a lot of Lovecraftian and cosmic horror writing changed in the 80s, and adopted a lot of the trademarks of what was going on with other horror in the 80s, meaning more violence and gore and more sex, and these are prominent features in other Lovecraftian writers of the time, and particularly in Michael Shea's work. Though he wrote mostly short fiction in his time with mythos, Shea also wrote a short novel called The Color Out of Time, which is meant as sort of a sequel to The Color Out of Space, the classic Lovecraft story, which is one of my favorites. I have yet to get around to reading that, but that's one thing I'm really looking forward to here at some point if I can get a copy of it. I've read two of his Michael Shea stories. I've read one called Fat Face, which I've read multiple times and I absolutely love, and one called Copping Squid. Both of these take place in California, and both of these take place in very grimy urban kind of environments, and that's like the really defining trait of him to me is that he took Lovecraft's entities and mythos and transplanted it into these gritty urban kind of 80s environments and these kinds of seedy situations where in Copping Squid the main character is kidnapped in a really rough neighborhood, and in the other story, Fat Face, the protagonist is a prostitute, which is for sexless, never talked to a woman ever in his life. I'm kidding, but Lovecraft was, there's none of that ever in Lovecraft's work. So it is a really, interesting, variation on what had been done before in the Cthulhu mythos. I can't say enough good about Fat Face in particular. It's such a good story. Like I rarely ever go out of my way to reread stories more than once, but that one I've read 2 or 3 times. It's genuinely more frightening in some ways than a lot of cosmic horror fiction. he just does such a good job at making the main character, feel very in danger of something that she doesn't understand, and that is very strange and malicious. Moving forward into the late 80s / early 90s, and since then, this author is still alive and still writing. This is another very different kind of spin on cosmic horror and on the Lovecraft mythos and that kind of thing. And I have an actual physical book here to show for this one. And that writer is Thomas Ligotti. Thomas Ligotti is a very unique writer for me. To sort of sum it up succinctly, Ligotti kind of marries cosmic horror and weird horror with existentialist writing. It's very literary, very heady, very, very purple prose. It's not the most digestible stuff. I really like it a lot, but it's not stuff that is easy at all, and it took me a while to get into it, but it is something that I've greatly come to appreciate. Ligotti has written nonfiction works about his philosophical views, and he's an extreme sort of pessimist. He's what he calls an anti-natalist. He doesn't think that the human race should continue to exist, and all of those ideas are sort of reflected in his works of fiction. This is maybe the most distinct of any of the writers that I've mentioned so far from Lovecraft's work. It really is kind of its own thing, more so than any of these other writers or the last one. And if I had to kind of sum up like what it is about it, it's that for all these other writers and for cosmic horror and for the Cthulhu mythos, all these entities are fundamentally alien and outside of our experience, and the horror derives from that. In this, the horror derives from the fact that this darkness and these entities and whatever they are, it is a part of us, and it comes from within us, and that is more nightmarish to me, more depressing certainly, but very profound in the effect that it has reading it. Maybe read it in little doses, because it's like I said, pretty depressing and also pretty dense, but very rewarding to read. The two stories that I would suggest checking out from Thomas Ligotti are Nethyscurial and The Last Feast of Harlequin. These are both featured in his Grimscribe collection. This book here that I'm holding up is a collection of his first two short story collections that were out of print and that Penguin Classics published. And notably, he's one of only 10 living authors who Penguin Classics have published a republishing of their work. So yeah, very strange. Not necessarily fun at all, but very good. And the last Lovecraftian author here that I have on my list that I would like to talk about is Laird Barron, who's a living author, contemporary, still writing, though he's having some health problems lately, so hopefully he recovers and we have him for a lot longer. I love Laird Barron a lot. Laird has been writing cosmic horror for like 20 years-ish now. This is his first short story collection called The Imago Sequence. It came out in 2007, I believe. Stylistically, Laird Barron marries together, cosmic horror with a very noir kind of writing style. A lot of these characters are very hard-boiled, and the prose reflects that. You can tell that he very much loves like mid-century noir crime stuff as well. He's also a crime fiction writer. He has a detective series called the Isaiah Coleridge books, I believe, and so he has an outlet for that as well. I haven't loved the stuff I've read from him that is more just like crime fiction, but that's not my favorite genre as it is. So, but anyway, his cosmic horror stuff is absolutely killer. He has his own mythos that is sort of centered around this entity called Old Leech, and its worshippers and its cult and that kind of thing. This is very flowery prose, particularly in the moments you get deep into the cosmic horror. It gets very psychedelic, very descriptive, very cerebral. And I love that kind of thing, not necessarily for everyone, but it's great to me. He's a really interesting guy. He used to be an Iditarod racer when he was a younger man. He's a native Alaskan. He also writes a lot in the Pacific Northwest where he lived, and in upstate New York where he currently lives, both places where I have lived, and I currently live in the Pacific Northwest. If you're looking for something to check out, first from Laird Barron, this is a good collection. I have a couple of his collections. I like this one the most so far. Also, the story The Men from Poroth, which is from his second collection, which I haven't read in full yet. But The Men from Poroth is the first story I read by him, and maybe still my favorite. Really great stuff. So yeah, there is my my list of 5 Lovecraftian horror authors that I think you should read. It's a great time for cosmic horror and weird horror. There's a lot of interest in this world right now, and in expanding it, and new variations on it. Whenever I see new writers that are in this ballpark, I'm always very excited to check them out. So yeah, if you have any great cosmic horror or Lovecraftian horror or weird horror or whatever recommendations, please leave them in the comments. I would greatly appreciate it, because this is the stuff that sets my imagination on fire, and I absolutely love it. Thank you so much, as always, for visiting the Rybrary. You're the very best. I love you all, and you may now talk.